This is the new 2022 Lexus LX600, and it's the latest version of the Lexus LX full-size luxury SUV. This is a big deal because the Lexus LX hasn't been fully redesigned in almost 15 years until now, and this one has a sticker price of over $120,000, placing it squarely up against the Range Rover, the Mercedes-Benz GLS, and other popular full-size luxury SUVs. And today, I'm going to review it. Before I get started, be sure to check out CarsnBins, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era, now with free listings. You can list your cool car for free and auction it on CarsnBins. And we've had some fantastic sales recently, including this Mitsubishi 3000 GT VR4 Spider brought over $43,000, this wonderful brand new Ford Raptor sold for over $86,000, and this Toyota Hiace van brought over $18,000 with a coffee maker and an ice maker built in from the factory. We love the weird stuff on CarsnBins. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, CarsnBins is the place to do it, with daily auctions and great selection at carsnbids.com. So let's talk LX600. In years past, the Lexus LX was sort of a more upscale version of the Toyota Land Cruiser, but that has now changed because the Land Cruiser is gone for North America for the 22 model year, leaving just the LX. Now, the latest version of the LX has totally new styling, a totally new interior, new technology, but maybe most importantly, a new engine. The old V8 is gone, replaced by a twin-turbo V6 that makes about 410 horsepower and about 480 pound-feet of torque. As for pricing, the new LX600 starts around $90,000, but this is the ultra-luxury model designed for the ultimate comfort experience for front and rear passengers, and it has a sticker price of just under $130,000. That puts this in contention with some serious luxury SUV players. So today I'm going to review the new LX and see how it compares. First, I'll take you on a thorough tour of the new LX600 and show you all of its interesting quirks and features. Then I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a DOUGSCORE. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features, the new LX600 on the inside, where you climb in here, and the first thing you see, if you've been in the old LX, is that this is a massive improvement. Far more modern, upgraded, updated, newer looking, simply better and more keeping with the times than the old one. The last LX debuted for the 2008 model year. They updated it a few times over the years, but they never gave it a full redesign until now, and this is a big leap forward. But probably the biggest leap forward is the infotainment system. The old LX still had Lexus's remote touch interface, which was this little touchpad, mousepad thing you had to use to control the screen, and it was a nightmare. This new LX ditches that finally, and instead you have a touchscreen mounted here, easy to use, very responsive, simple, intuitive. Finally, a touchscreen, ending the horrible era of the remote touch controller. And really, this infotainment system is pretty good. Very responsive, gives the info you want, easy to figure out, easy to use. There's one little drawback, which is it's rather large. You can see it's quite wide, and yet you can't display multiple items at once. So like you can have the navigation map up, as you can see, but if you want to also see your music, well, you got to go to the music tab, but then you lose the map. A lot of these modern infotainment screens let you show 2 or even 3 things at once, and I wish this one did too, but I'm not going to complain that much because this is so much better than the prior system. Now, another nice benefit of the new LX is, as good as this infotainment system is, you still have a separate set of controls for your climate control features. So you don't have to go into the infotainment system buried in some screen to change your climate controls. You can see all those controls here. Now, obviously, you have your normal climate stuff. You can change the temperature, where the air is flowing, all that. But you also have this button marked Climate Concierge. If you press that and set a temperature, the car will do everything for you. not just the climate control air temperature, but also turn on your heated, cooled seats and steering wheel to make sure that your entire body is the exact temperature you set. It is a true concierge doing every part of the climate control to make you as comfortable as possible, which is kind of a cool feature, just one press of the button. Now, as you can obviously see, above the climate controls, you have a second screen, a smaller screen than the large one at the top of the center control stack, and this one has a few different functions. Climate controls is one. You can see here there's a climate tab. You go in and you have additional climate adjustments beyond the hard buttons that you have in the center control stack. This is for climate functions you might use a little bit less frequently in this screen. You also can use this screen for your off-roading equipment and monitoring, which is kind of interesting. For instance, you can see exactly what suspension height setting you're on and various other items in the screen to let you monitor like your current off-road mode and menu situation. However, as good as this whole center control stack, all new touchscreen technology is, there are still some very old feeling items inside the interior of this brand new car. For example, the gear selector. You have like an old school gear selector where you push a button and then bring it down into drive or push it up into reverse. Virtually everybody has gone away from these old gear levers for smaller solutions that free up more space in the interior, but for some reason this car still has this old one. And how about the fact that next to the gear selector there's no wireless charging pad? This space here looks like a wireless charging pad, but it isn't one. And also this space in front of the gear selector isn't a charging pad. You don't actually have a wireless charging pad in the front seats of the new Lexus LX, which makes no sense. This is a six-figure vehicle, and that's something that even Toyota RAV4s have, but not this. Crazy decision. And another item in this interior that doesn't really fit with this vehicle's price point and seems kind of old is the gauge cluster screen situation. You can see it here. There is a gauge cluster screen, full color, but it's not really very big. Most rivals to this vehicle have a full screen here that incorporates all gauges in the cluster, but you can see the LX still has some analog gauges on the side. And even worse, the part that's actually configurable within this gauge cluster screen takes up a really small portion of this screen, which means that all the fonts and icons are really tiny. You can see this list of configurable safety equipment is all abbreviations and really small icons that you have to know a lot to know what all this means. If this screen was simply larger, that stuff could be displayed a lot better, but it isn't, and it definitely feels kind of old given that. And my screen complaints aren't quite done. This car features probably the worst around view 360 camera of any car. You press this little button to the left of the steering wheel marked view, and then the camera pops up on the center screen and look at it. You don't see much that's around you, and the camera rotates at its own pace. All other cars, you can adjust exactly what you're looking at, left, right, up, down, but this one, it makes its own circle and you can only pause it. That's your only ability to configure where this camera is pointing. It's absolutely bizarre and not really all that useful. Now, fortunately, the regular camera system, when you shift into reverse, is excellent. High resolution, great quality, good top-down camera, but that 360 camera system is just bad. Fortunately, there are some items that are really nice to have in this Lexus LX interior. One of them is all of the off-roading hardware that you can switch on at any moment. You can see the switches and controls here. On the left, you have MTS, which stands for Multi-Terrain Select. You can choose what terrain you're on, and the car will optimize its systems to drive on it as best as possible. DAC/crawl is the crawl control system, which is like an off-road cruise control that can help you get unstuck even when you're really stuck. And then, of course, you have a four-wheel drive system with high and low. And in the center console, you can see your center differential locker button as well. Still some off-road focus in the LX. Most of this vehicle's rivals have given that stuff up, but not here. Also in this vicinity, you can see this giant dial here that says Mode Select. You can twist that and go through the drive modes in the LX, and there are surprisingly quite a few. You have Eco, Comfort, Normal, and then two separate sport modes, Sport and Sport S Plus, which seems a little bit like overkill for a large, lumbering luxury SUV, but you got two different sport modes in case you want to go sporty or ultra sporty. And speaking of storage areas in the front seats of this car, How about the center console? You press this button here, the center console opens up and reveals that it is a cooler. Not a refrigerator, but it will keep things cool. It's like a cool box that you can stick in drinks or sandwiches and keep them cool. Now, also interesting in this center console, it opens from the other side. The passenger also has a button. They can open it, or the driver can. It opens from either side, which frankly to me looks like magic, and it is kind of cool that they engineered it that way. Also, one other item I really like in this interior is the rear view mirror. You can see right now it's just a standard rear view mirror, but if you flip this switch, it becomes a camera. More and more cars are including this feature. I think they all should have it, because then you don't have to look through rear passengers and luggage and headrest to see what's behind you, and it's nice to see that integrated into the new LX. But if you want the true luxury in the new Lexus LX, or at least in this version, you have to step into the back seat, because that's where you'll find two individual reclining, beautiful seats back here. It looks almost like a luxury airplane cabin when you're traveling in first class. Now, this isn't standard. The new LX comes standard with a 5-seating configuration and a bench seat back here, but most of these will be equipped with 3-row seating and an extra row in the back. However, if you step up to this model, the ultra luxury version, it comes with 2 individual rear seats and a lot of different luxury amenities, which I will show you, starting with the screens mounted on the backs of the front seats. You can see them here. These are touch screens. They are quite large, and they allow you to control the media that you're listening to or watching back here. You can use this to control music, or if you're watching a movie, whatever, this is how you do it on these screens. You even have inside this rear compartment an HDMI port, so you can plug in a video game console or a DVD player, whatever you want, and then you can use that to watch stuff while you sit back here relaxing in your individual chairs. But those aren't the only screens back here. You also have a screen here in the center, as you can see, and it has quite a few functions. I'm going to start with the climate tab. You press that and you can adjust your climate controls back here. Of course, air temperature, where it's coming out, fan speed, that sort of thing, but also heated and ventilated rear seats, which is a very nice ultra luxury touch for the ultra luxury model. Now, your next interesting tab here is the seats tab, and if you go to that, well, you can adjust the seats. Now, if you're sitting behind the driver, your adjustment is relatively limited, but you can move the seat forward or backward, and you can move the backrest forward or backward too, which is pretty standard. The seat you really want to be sitting in, though, is this one, the seat directly behind the front passenger seat, because you have a lot more adjustments you can make for optimal comfortability, including you can move the front passenger seat completely out of the way. And look at this. It really moves completely out of the way. It goes as far forward and folded as possible in order to give you as much rear seat room as you possibly can. There's a lot of space with that front passenger seat completely gone. And once it's gone, you can then recline this rear passenger side seat, recline it almost to a lying flat position, as if you're on a first class airplane flight. Here you are sitting in the back of your Lexus getting the same luxury treatment. Now, next up, another tab you can access here on this center screen is the massage tab, where you can turn on massaging in the rear seats. And you can see you have quite a few different massaging options back here for any type of massage you might want while you're being chauffeured along. One interesting thing, the front seats don't offer a massaging feature. They do on a lot of other luxury SUVs, but not here. You can only get it in the back seats in this ultra luxury model. Now, next in this center screen is probably the very strangest screen control of all, and that would be the light tab. The only function in here is it turns on this light mounted above the rear seats. That's all it does. You can turn it on, you can dim it, you can turn it off. For some reason, there's an entire tab in the screen devoted to that rather than just a switch next to the light to do that function so much easier, but for some reason it's integrated into the screen. Kind of an overcomplication, although I must say I do like how these lights operate. You can kind of move them around in any direction you want and point them at whatever you're looking at, which adds more lighting in the back, of course. But anyway, next Next up, some more luxury items in the rear seat, and probably the strangest luxury item in the rear seat is this wireless cell phone charging pad. You can see back here, wireless charging pad, but as I mentioned, there isn't one in front. Rear passengers have a wireless charging pad, but front passenger and driver don't. It doesn't really make all that much sense, but that's what they've chosen to do. Now, speaking of charging back here, you have an enormous amount of charging options. In this front storage compartment near your feet, you can see two different USB-C ports for charging devices. But if you open up this larger center console, you can see two more USB-C ports for charging devices, and you have a cigarette lighter outlet style charger back there, and of course you have the wireless charging pad like I already mentioned. So 6 different ways you can charge devices in the back of the LX600. And by the way, speaking of that rear center console, yes, just like in front, it opens up both ways. You can open it on the driver's side or on the passenger side, and again, it really seems like magic to me, but it is kind of cool that you have that dual opening lid. And by the way, speaking of opening compartments like that, one cool thing in the LX is that rear passengers have a button to access the front center console compartment. You can see it here. You press that and that compartment opens up, and then you can stick stuff in there. The reason for that, of course, is that rear passengers may want access to that cooler, and so access isn't just limited to the front, which is kind of a cool idea. Now, in case you're wondering what's in the other compartments back here, there's a second compartment near your feet. That one's just for storage. You open it up and you can put little items in there. The little compartment here in the center console area next to the screen, you open that up and you have cup holders. So obviously that's where you place your drinks when you're back here. It's nice and convenient and easily within arm's reach. Now, another cool item back here is you have rear seat sunshades. You can see they're integrated into the doors. You just pull on this tab, lift it up, and then you can clip the sunshade in place, and you have that, which is kind of nice. Now, that's not all that unusual for luxury SUVs at this price point, but one very cool feature, you also have a sunshade for the window behind the seat. You can see it here. If you can reach around and lift this sunshade up, then you can get even more sun protection than you get in pretty much any other SUV. An extra rear window sunshade, kind of cool. And next up, we move on to the cargo area in the LX600, where you'll find a rather interesting thing right away, and that would be the tailgate opens normally. As you can see, it just opens right up normally. Now, you might be wondering, why do I say that's interesting? And that's because all prior LX models since this first came out in the 90s have had a split tailgate where part of it opens up and the other part opens down, so you can like sit on it or picnic or tailgate or whatever. Now, Lexus has ditched that with this model in favor of a power tailgate, which I guess makes more sense, but it is worth noting the Range Rover has both a split tailgate and a power tailgate, which is a nice integration. And frankly, I miss having the lower part that you can sit on, which is kind of a nice feature that I actually use all the time in my vehicles that have it. But anyway, looking into the cargo area, you can see this is a fairly standard cargo area, and there is no third row seat present back here. That's unusual for the LX. Most of these will be sold with a third row, but because this is the ultra luxury model with those luxurious rear seats, it has 4 seats only this particular version. Now, one big benefit of the new LX and its third row seat is that it finally folds flat into the cargo floor. In the past, the third row in this vehicle folded up to the sides, which limited visibility and stole some cargo space, but it now has a fold flat third row like most other modern luxury SUVs, and that's a cool feature to have. However, with that said, one drawback about the third row in the new LX is it's pretty tight, not a lot of space back there. Third rows are already pretty small, but they're especially small here. The LX is about 3 to 6 inches shorter than most of its rivals, the BMW X7, the Mercedes GLS, and a lot of that space is taken out of that third row legroom, so it's pretty tight in the third row of an LX, and it feels pretty small. And finally, last interesting item inside the cargo area back here, you have a household style power outlet. You can see it here under this cover, which is pretty nice. Pop it open, you can plug in stuff and charge it, and that's good to have. But one rather unusual quirk that's worth mentioning, going back to the tailgate for a second, take a look at the rear of the tailgate and you will notice you have Lexus written out in large print on the back. That is different from prior LX models and all prior Lexus SUVs. It used to just be the Lexus L badge, but they've gotten rid of that in favor of this larger font that spells out the brand name, and it's quite a bit more in your face about exactly what this vehicle is. But when it comes to in your face design elements of the new Lexus LX, nothing compares to the grille. The grille is absolutely massive, ridiculously gargantuan, truly huge, and it seems to grow more with every little update they do. Take a look at the 2008 Lexus LX front end. Looks fairly standard, reasonably attractive. And 2013 came and it got a little bit bigger, okay. Then in 2016 it got massive and huge and things started to go south, and now for 2022 we have this. This is so huge. It takes up the entire front end, and honestly, it is starting to look like a caricature, like the kind of thing that would be in a meme about how grills are getting so big. Now we have this, truly the largest grille in the entire car industry, I have to assume. It is massive, it is ridiculous, and it looks insane. And this is kind of a drawback of the LX. Now, I will say there are other versions of the LX, including an F Sport model, where some of this stuff is darkened, including this grille, and it looks a little better, but it is hard to hide the fact that the grille has become so truly huge. It's really, really insane in this vehicle. Interestingly, aside from that Lexus written out on the back and the massive grille, the rest of the exterior styling is pretty restrained. This has always been kind of a hallmark of the Lexus LX and the Toyota Land Cruiser, and indeed, it's pretty calm, pretty reasonable. They don't take a lot of risks with the look of this vehicle. Certainly doesn't have like the beauty and the panache of Range Rover or G-Wagon. It's a lot more under the radar, except when it comes to this massive front grille. But speaking of the front end for the new LX, the big story for this vehicle is under here, and that's because the old V8 is gone. It was a big, torquey, powerful, reliable powertrain, and it's gone, replaced instead by a twin-turbo V6. Now, Toyota and Lexus say this is a 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6. It's actually a 3.4-liter. I think they just think 3.5 sounds better in marketing. I mean this. But regardless of its size, here are the particulars: 410 horsepower, 480 pound-feet of torque, pretty strong numbers, and on paper, this engine improves over the old one in every single way. It's about 25 horsepower more than the outgoing V8 and about 75 pound-feet of torque more. So even though it's just a V6, it gets more power and torque. It also helps the new LX become lighter than the outgoing model. This is a smaller engine than before, and so it doesn't weigh as much. And that, compared with some other changes to the LX, mean that this new model is 450 pounds lighter than the outgoing LX. That, of course, helps with acceleration, and it also helps with fuel economy. This powertrain is dramatically better in terms of gas mileage. The old one was rated at 14 miles per gallon in combined city and highway driving. This brings it up to 19, which still doesn't sound like a huge number, but it is a massive increase over the outgoing powertrain, and that will be beneficial. And the new engine also has a higher towing capacity, 8,000 pounds in the new LX with the V6 compared to 7,000 pounds in the old model with the V8. So it's lighter, it's more efficient, more powerful, more torque, and it tows more. It seems like all better with no real drawbacks. And finally, last thing I want to cover before I get behind the wheel of the new LX is pricing. Now, like I've said, this is the top-of-the-line model, the ultra-luxury version, and it has a sticker price of just under $130,000. But my guess is these will be pretty rare, very expensive, and not especially practical with those 2 rear seats. Instead, most people are going to get the other versions. The base model LX comes with 2 rows of seats, 5 total seats, and it starts just under $90,000. But I suspect that the majority of sales will be 3-row seat models, and they range from $95,000 to about $105,000, and of course that's before options. So figure maybe $100,000 to $110,000 normally equipped for most LX models. Or you can step up to the king of the hill, the ultra luxury, and recline in your back seat. And so those are the quirks and features of the new 2022 Lexus LX600. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the new Lexus LX600. I have been very excited to drive the LX600 because I own the Toyota Land Cruiser from the prior body style, which of course the old Lexus LX was based on. The Lexus LX and the Land Cruiser were the same basic vehicle, just the Lexus was a little more upscale. So I own the old one, and I've been very excited to check out the new one, especially since the Land Cruiser is gone in America for 22. This is all we get if you're into Land Cruisers. So there's a lot to say with this one, so let's just get into it. I want to talk first about where it excels, and to me there are three main areas where this is really a great vehicle. One is the driving position. You sit up high, you have a great sitting position, you don't feel like you're in a crossover, you feel like you're in like a big vehicle that looks out over everything. And even some large SUVs are starting to lose that feeling, but this one does feel commanding, and that's a reason that a lot of people buy these vehicles. Another big benefit of the LX is the reliability. These are famous for being long-term, big mile, reliable vehicles. You'll see 20-year-old ones come up with 250,000 miles all the time. You don't get that in Range Rovers, you don't get that in Mercedes-Benz. These things are known for eating miles and doing it reliably, and as a result, their resale value is exceptionally high. Everybody on the used market knows that a used Lexus LX is a smart buy because it's going to last forever, and so these retain their value a lot better than Mercedes, BMW, etc., and thus cost of ownership is lower. So those are two big benefits. The third big benefit to me with the new LX, unquestionably the powertrain. So preface this, I am a V8 guy. I love my V8s. I have, I think, 4 V8 powered cars currently, and I'm a little skeptical of turbo V6s that say they can do the same, but this one can do the same. I love this powertrain. I drove this engine in the new Toyota Land Cruiser. It was fantastic in that. I assumed it would be the same here. It is. It is a peppy, powerful, eager powertrain. It has good power for the size of this vehicle. The fact that it is no longer a V8 is absolutely not a problem. The V8 is not missed at all, especially at the fuel pump. So you might be asking, well, what are the drawbacks then? And I'm surprised to say they're not insignificant. The oldness of this vehicle is so clear, and it's amazing because this is a brand new vehicle. But why am I using this old school gear lever to put it in gear? Why doesn't it have wireless charging? Why doesn't it have a full gauge screen display? Why doesn't it have a panoramic sunroof? Why doesn't it have massaging seats? There's actually a lot of this stuff that you can get in as you really start to dig down in this vehicle. It feels old in here, even though it's brand new. And Toyotas and Toyota trucks and the 4Runner can kind of get away with that stuff because people want that old simplicity of these vehicles. But this at $130,000, even the regular ones at $110,000, $112,000, they need to be newer feeling than this. This just doesn't feel like a new and modern luxury SUV on the inside. And then we get to the driving experience. I gotta say, this vehicle feels unsettled. Going around corners, it has a lot of body roll, the suspension has a lot of travel, and when you go over bumps, there's a lot of kind of wallowing around in a weird sort of unsettled way. You can mitigate some of that by going into Sport Mode or Sport Plus, but I honestly feel like you have to go into Sport or Sport Plus just to firm up the suspension enough to make this feel like a normal driving vehicle. Now, the reason that this happens, and this is kind of the core of the LX's problem, is that the LX is ultimately based on the same chassis as the Toyota Tundra, the Land Cruiser, the new Sequoia, body-on-frame, truck-based vehicles. And so it will never quite have this amazing smoothness and car-like feel that you get in a Mercedes-Benz GLS or a new Range Rover or a BMW X7. And that is a problem for this vehicle. Now, I don't fault Toyota for doing that. They already make a car like this, the Land Cruiser, but that's a utilitarian vehicle in a lot of markets. Land Cruisers are used by the United Nations to transport people. They're used by farmers in some country. They're used as basic work vehicles. And to try to convert a car like that into an ultra luxury SUV that competes with a Range Rover is a very tall order. And Toyota does a good job, but they don't do a perfect job. If your goal is to own it for a long time and get all the miles out of it, you still want this car. It's not as good as GLS and Range Rover, but it will do that better than they ever will. However, if your goal is to just have like a nice 3-year lease to drive around Orange County or the Chicago suburbs or Scottsdale or Preston Hollow in Dallas, you don't want this vehicle. You're paying for the longevity factor that you're not using, and you're actually getting a lesser car in terms of tech, in terms of style, in terms of interior materials, in terms of ride comfort and driving experience than most of its rivals. And so that's the new 2022 Lexus LX600. This is an impressive SUV, certainly an ultra-luxury SUV, just like it says, although I think that most buyers will prefer the beauty and the driving experience and the brand name of vehicles like the Range Rover and the Mercedes GLS and G-Wagon. Still, the new LX is here, and it's a big improvement over the old one. And now it's time to give the LX a DOUGSCORE. And the DOUGSCORE is here, 57 out of 100, which places the LX600 here against rivals. It does okay. The LX600 is certainly better than the old LX570 and the Toyota Land Cruiser, but I just can't give this a higher score than rivals like the BMW X7, Cadillac Escalade, Mercedes GLS, Range Rover, and Lincoln Navigator. The new LX has a great powertrain, but it's let down by a floaty, unsettled feel on the road, smaller interior sizing, unusual styling, and an interior that's still not on par with more modern rivals.